Innovation. Well, that's a mouthful. What is it actually? I've been trying to study what it could mean, and probably there are as many definitions of innovation as the number of experts on the field around the world. And I tried to understand it by starting simple. I started by asking my wife. She's an engineer, and we were cleaning some mushrooms. And when you clean mushrooms, you start to look for a Scandinavian mushroom that's called Amanita muscaria, because you don't want to eat it. It's poisonous. So, thinking along those lines, research, well, that perhaps shows that it's poisonous. Development, well, like Carl Linnaeus discovered, it kills bedbugs. And as our Viking forebears understood it, it makes Vikings strong and their shamans wise. Perhaps innovation today is the recent discovery of the University of Copenhagen that this mushroom actually kills cancer cells. That is innovation. And of course, you could look at R&D, a systematic search for new knowledge using scientific methods, and find more and more definitions. And as a science writer, I try to describe how innovation is presented to the public. Because it is an era of innovation, isn't it? Just one simple device. I use a single instrument for my work, for entertainment, for buying everything from clothes to food. And, well, it's the web. It's as normal as reading a daily newspaper. Actually, some of you would ask, what's a daily newspaper nowadays? So I use a smartphone, and it has actually absorbed so many things. The telephone, the city guide, the planner, the wristwatch, etc., etc. And this innovative technology of the internet of smartphones has enabled organizations to change the way they work, the way they think about things, and also how they produce things. And it redefines culture, knowledge, communication, and we see also that it changes us, how we think about these things on a societal level. Those are radical changes that might have affected your life. And I haven't even spoken about innovation in medicine, in new material technologies, etc., etc. Innovation seems to be moving forward quite rapidly, and sometimes also cross-fertilizing. But sometimes I wonder, isn't this too much? Isn't the concept dilating? So I made a checkup, a search with the Stock Exchange Security Chamber, the SEC, and they made a search of how many times the mention of innovation came up in corporate reports last year, their quarter and annual reports, and they found thousands of mentions. And if you look back in time, you see that since 2006, mentions are up 64%. You find that more and more companies have chief innovation officers. And I made a search on Amazon on the word innovation, and found hundreds and thousands of titles. Books. There are many books written about this, many, and some of them are good, some of them are bad. But hey, most companies say they're innovative in the hope that they can somehow con investors into thinking there is growth when there isn't. That's tough love from Clayton Christensen of Harvard Business School. But he does have a point about it, because there is a lot of cultural affectation about the term innovation. We want to use it. It's advertisement. Being innovative is cool, isn't it? Previously, innovation was technology, research, finding something new. This is one of the first TV studios that were built in Berlin when TV was new. It was a radical step because it started a whole new line of business, a whole new way of communicating. This is perhaps more indicative of innovation today. This is from the Museum of Far Eastern Antiquities here in Stockholm. They found out a way to scan and preserve ancient Chinese scrolls. And, well, basically it's a form of better photocopying, a better microfilm with some interactivity added, as I can scroll on this scroll. And perhaps this is the way innovation often is perceived today. Are we just talking about a better product, a good product? Or are we doing something a bit better than previously, or something radically new? And actually, the tech industry isn't the ones that usually use this word too much, because if you check the annual reports of tech companies and of consumer product companies, you will find about the same amount of use of this word. But we use it for so many new areas. We use it for employees, we use it when we describe organizations, when we describe how churches, charities, etc., should be organized. It's for strengthening our own culture, and also to promote role models for what we want to communicate. And it seems sometimes as we're speaking more and more of innovation, and not what we want to innovate, what we want to do new things. And when the goal of innovation is just innovation, perhaps we lose track. And we often also lose track of its disruptive nature. Is it really just more of the same? Because if we look at the important themes of today, we often find risk aversion, actually, rather than a wish to innovate. We can see it in some simple examples that we have bailout schemes to save the banks that are making losses. We see companies coping with struggle through cutting the costs. We see, unfortunately, quite a lot of people paying their debts with their credit cards. So, there you go. So how could you use innovation? Innovation actually, let's see. And innovation actually has brought us to more of a risk-averse culture in this respect, because we often value short-term predictability, standardization, and risk reduction. And why? Well, there are many things to cope with. And if things are simple, you will find innovation and new opportunities more dangerous and difficult. If we look at short term, innovative ideas may take years. One instance is how Twitter started. Regardless of what they're doing as a mature company, they started in an interesting way because they were a spin-off from Audio, a podcasting company, and it was first developed as an SMS service. They started with this company in July 2006, and they had to wait until the users came. Actually, until they got their first million of users in 2009, and that's quite a lot of time to wait. So you have to give them that they were resilient. Predictability, and here we often discuss patents. Have they become more plentiful, and are they doing their job of spurring innovation? And the problem is that you can see various patent environments, and they are working more or less well. Some work better and promote some innovation and give some protection. Others don't, and actually just make the innovator conform to, well, what's required to get a patent. So perhaps just developing new patent isn't innovative in itself. Then, of course, you have the issue of standardization. Standardization is, of course, a beneficial process because you can make things the same. It gives repeatable and predictable results. You can promote compatibility through this, and you can see how you do this and repeat it. The problem is, of course, that technical specifications have to be the same. You cannot experiment with them when you're doing the same thing all over again. It promotes credentialism in the workforce because you have to be standardized in order to fit into organizations. And of course, innovation doesn't go well in hand with if you need a global code of conduct. You do the same things all over the globe in all situations, and you're predictable. And it's not a good way to promote innovation. It might promote other goals. Of course, why do we do this? Well, complexity and unpredictability are tough. They are costly. Is this thing we're actually developing the next big thing or a dud? You never know about the next big thing, what it's going to be, but you certainly know that you don't want to develop the next big dud. And of course, you're a bit afraid of your new product cannibalizing on your previous success because you don't want to be in competition with yourself. Of course, since we have been so successful, the lines of development, the older innovations, they are seeing diminishing returns, and thus it doesn't seem to give as much to continue innovating. So why do it? But ultimately, you will find yourself down the line and in need of innovating, especially since the environment changes. And if you need to meet a specific financial target, of course, you can't go for too long or too far, because then it creates volatility. And the problem on this focus on time to market is that it breaks down much of the opportunity to mix, try new ideas, to use ideas anew, to perhaps find a new solution. You often find this. One example is the pharmaceutical industry, where they often complain that the pipeline is dry. Well, it's difficult to innovate when each step of innovation is monitored and is monitored by requirement of law. So, Columbus, he got it all wrong. He didn't stay to the mission, true to the mission statement. Or did he? Was he a winner actually? Well, he died in obscurity. Nobody remembered him. They even named the continent that he discovered with the name of some other guy. But we still remember him. And perhaps if you have a rigid controlled environment, it's easy to pick the winners because you know what you're supposed to do. But you don't find a new continent. Finding another continent, well, that's perhaps an example is Viagra. It's a matter of the heart. Why? Well, it was developed to cure angina pectoris, but it failed in the clinical studies. But they noticed that it seemed to have a good effect on penile erection, and thus it found a new use. One of the best known examples of this is Xerox PARC, where they developed such things as the Ethernet, the PostScript, and the computer mouse. But it took Steve Jobs to redevelop the mouse and use it in a new context, perhaps with a new idea behind it also. And why wasn't it developed there? Well, it wasn't in the mission statement. It disrupted the business model, and thus you needed to change the way you thought, and it wasn't in the mission statement. Disruption might bring quite a lot of resentment, because the danger is always to aim low and you achieve it. For instance, if you start to think about affordable housing, you might go from the slum shack, to an ordinary villa, hopefully someday. But then you leave out the opportunities for innovation when it comes to making this sustainable, to think about how energy could be preserved because it simply costs too much. So how can you redefine innovation? Should we redefine innovation because it's gone too bland and also lost its meaning, or should we go back to the basics? Perhaps proaction is a way of doing it. Perhaps focusing more on proaction instead of precaution. And the question here is how you could use it. This is a concept used by a philosopher called Max Moore. It's actually quite similar to the old system of looking at the cost-benefit analysis instead of just looking at the issues and on the problems. I think that this could be improved if you look at more open-ended solutions to problems. If you could look for something that is renewable, something that makes innovation more of a habit, because then disruption and risks don't become so terribly marked in your innovative process. One way to use it is to look at smart grids. How could you redo energy distribution in society? That's innovation as a habit on a societal level. You can look like Marbler on a gamified research, or you can just, as a private person, try to find better mushrooms through the internet. So let's go out and pick mushrooms.